a race for the ages. Two superpowers, the United States
Godspeed, John Glenn.
and Russia.
Cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin described his journey.
Destination, the final frontier.
Yuri Gagarin had moved the Soviet Union into preeminence.
During the late 1950s, the Soviets enjoyed complete space domination, a Red Scare that frightened a country.
There was fear, I think, nationwide, maybe worldwide.
You know, the Sputnik was a real problem to our ego.
The Russians were orbiting circles around the United States and its fledgling space program.
We choose to go to the moon.
Then, in 1961, President Kennedy ups the ante.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
It was just a huge challenge.
We had an opportunity to leapfrog the Russians.
Yeah, it was a lofty goal, to put it mildly.
Following President Kennedy's moon mandate, NASA's top brass gathered at the Research Center in Langley, Virginia. Their goal? Hatch the plan to go where no one had gone before.
We had to invent everything that went along. It was all new. We wrote the books.
We had to do everything from scratch, and that's what made it so difficult. But that's what working here was all about.
The notion of landing a human being on the moon was considered by many scientists at the time to be downright absurd. No way would the Apollo mission work. Surely a disaster waiting to happen. But what the doubters didn't consider was the ingenuity and fearlessness of a group of young NASA workers who all shared one thing in common: a can-do spirit.
You have the skeptics.
A lot of people didn't think that we could do it, that NASA could do it.
We were really confident. There wasn't a whole lot of worry that, you know, something's going to go wrong. At least it wasn't verbalized.
You can't imagine or comprehend initially what you're actually doing.
An army of engineers, scientists, and civilian workers shaping the Apollo program also shouldered the dreams of a nation, a challenge they readily accepted.
It was the place where all the excitement was. It was a great place to be. And as a kind of a space cadet, I was loving it.
We were just totally wrapped up in the program.
Fuel cell disconnect, AC bus overload 1 and 2, main bus A and B out.
There were plenty of stumbles and hurdles in the early going. Failures were common. From working on the Apollo's tracking system to the emergency parachutes, the lunar project was grueling for everyone involved.
It was a lot of hard work, and it was no days off for about 6 weeks at a time for every mission.
It probably resulted in a lot of failed marriages. I mean, that was the price that was paid.
Apollo astronauts didn't train for their moon landing at Mission Control in Houston or Cape Canaveral in Florida. Rather, the crew members sharpened their skills right here in Virginia. Langley's former director, Paul Holloway, remembers these real-life Buck Rogers.
They were fun to be around. They were very confident, but they were very, very committed. They worked hard. Played hard, too, but they worked hard.
There were several test missions before the lunar landing.
That really strengthened the confidence of the people both in the program and I think in the country.
The three-man crew of Apollo 8 would orbit the moon for the first time and snap one of the most memorable photos ever.
It's a famous picture of the Earthrise over the moon. It's amazing.
I didn't know that that was a part of the mission, and it wasn't. It was strictly seat of the pants thinking. Turned out great.
That's just a fabulous photograph.
While historic in its own right, Apollo 8 would be the test run for what NASA would attempt 7 short months later. With the eyes of the world watching, Apollo 11, carrying astronauts Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins, and Neil Armstrong, blasts off July 16, 1969. Ahead of them, a 4-day, 240,000-mile journey.
You're always kind of biting your nails.
Okay, we're all organized again, John.
So there are plenty of things that you can worry about.
20 feet down, 2.5.
As the Apollo capsule approached its target,
4 forward, drift into the right a little.
NASA workers in Virginia and across the nation who toiled for nearly a decade to reach this very moment held their collective breaths.
There were a lot of butterflies in everybody's stomach.
It's really nerve-wracking.
That was only one shot. You know, that was it.
Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. Listen, the Eagle has landed.
With 500 million people watching at home, Neil Armstrong would climb out of the lunar module and walk into the history books.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Or just more awe than anything else. I mean, it's unbelievable.
It just sent chills up your spine.
A defining event that would leave even the most trusted man in America speechless.
Boy. We're going to be busy for a minute.
You had heard of the man on the moon all your life, and there it was.
It was euphoria. It was awesome to watch that happening.
After planting the stars and stripes and capturing some iconic images, explorers Aldrin, Armstrong, and Collins would return home.
Until that crew was back on the ground, that mission was not a success, and I don't think anyone here would have called it such.
It was always really nice to see those parachutes come out.
The first moonwalk would last just 2 hours, but the impact of this extraordinary trip will span countless lifetimes.
You got something? Magnificent sight out here.
Apollo 11 defied all odds and is arguably mankind's greatest achievement.
Before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon,
It fulfilled the promise of a late president with 6 months to spare.
Everything worked. It's hard to believe.
And for those who played a role, large or small, it is clear 40 years later, the lunar landing remains to this day a moment unmatched in their lives.
Anything can come true. In essence, the human race can accomplish almost anything it wants to do. And we did it.
Oh, absolutely. Greatest thing that ever happened in my lifetime.
It's a great endeavor to say, well, we said we would do it, and we did it.
I have a sailboat, and out on the water at night with a full moon. It's wonderful. And look up and say, yeah, we've been there.
And to all the other people that are listening and watching tonight, God bless you. Good night from Apollo 11.